I think we often overestimate the amount of social support that people have had in their
Mhm.
lives or really healthy human connection.
Yep.
And one of the positive things about parasocial relationships is the idea that you can have a positive role model, someone that you relate
Yeah.
to, and you're like, because I can think of so many people who have had that experience where they're like, I didn't know anybody who had my life story
Yep.
or my experience. And I saw this person who is a public figure and who's successful being who they are. And it
Yeah.
made me feel like maybe I could make it, or
Yeah.
maybe my life had meaning and purpose, and I wasn't
Mhm.
doomed to be whatever negative things people told me.
Yeah.
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive
So
in.
welcome, Lana. I am so excited to have you back on the podcast.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be back, April. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So listeners might remember you from episode 47, where you talked about honoring your thresholds as a Black HSP. A
Hmm.
lot of folks love that conversation, but we're going in a little bit of a different direction today, talking
Hmm.
about the HSP experience of parasocial relationships.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if you could share with listeners a little bit about how we came about this conversation today.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So actually, it started from the last time that I was on the podcast because I remember looking at, I think, some of your blog posts and newsletters where you were sharing how much of a music fan that you were. And I can
Yeah.
definitely relate to that. I'm a huge music fan. And I think after the last podcast episode recording, we were talking about kind of that experience of being a music fan and
Yeah.
finding out that your favorite artist or band has, been accused of something egregious,
Yes.
and how within these different fan communities there could be a discussion about like how to deal with it, but also people's thoughts and feelings about it. And often, as I'm sure, viewers and audience members can relate to, is one of the things people say is like, oh, just enjoy the music. Like, don't think about what this
Yeah.
person has done. And it's like, well, but this like lives inside of me, like this
Yes.
music and everything that it means for my life.
Mm.
It is a part of me. It's a part of so many memories that I've formed and experiences I've had that it's a painful experience to just extricate it. But then also, like, how do I ethically, morally, like, face these accusations as a consumer?
Exactly, because you're right. It's like in our DNA. I mean, when I listen to old CDs that I've kind of pulled out of the archives of my storage unit or my back shed, it's like, oh, these are so wrapped up in my memories.
Hmm.
So when something does come up that's problematic, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a bit, it's pretty heartbreaking, right? It's like
Yeah.
disorienting. What do I do with this,
Hmm.
right? So before we jump too far in, just for folks who may have not heard this term parasocial relationship, because this is one I only learned maybe a year or two ago, could you define it for us before we go any further?
Yeah, so actually, like parasocial relationships, but also parasocial interaction dates back to a peer-reviewed journal article that was
Hmm.
co-written by Donald Horton and R. Richard Wohl, or that's my German pronunciation, but it's probably Americanized as like Wohl, in 1956. And so basically, a parasocial interaction denotes exposure to a public figure or even a fictitious character
Mm.
that elicits a socio-emotional connection from a viewer, fan, follower, or consumer. Now, after repeated parasocial interactions, a parasocial relationship is formed in which the public figure or fictitious character is regarded in a way similar to a loved one with deep emotional
Mm.
intimacy and personal identification.
Mm.
But here's the rub, it's one-sided. So like obviously if it's a fictitious character, there like it just doesn't exist at all.
Right?
But like if it is a real life person who either is just like their work is like themselves or their work is related to, creating music or acting or
Yeah.
etc., is that person doesn't know about the emotional psychological connection that a fan or a viewer is making with them.
Right.
um, Even if they're aware of it just as a general point of consciousness is not reciprocated. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm calling you all the time or hanging out. I'm deeply involved in your life.
Hmm. Right. That's such a good point that it's at the level of a loved one, so it's so deeply emotionally entangled for this for us as the I don't know, the fan or the
Hmm.
follower. But right, the other person has no idea.
Mm-mm.
I mean, this seems kind of dangerous emotionally speaking.
It can be. And I mean, this is tricky. I think one of the things that I try to do when I talk about or even think about parasocial relationships is it's common because I think sometimes there can be this like
Right.
self-righteousness when people talk about like, oh my gosh, that's like so stupid and weird and like why would anybody do that? But
Right.
I think everyone to some degree, even
Hmm.
if you're not consciously aware of it, has made that kind of connection at some point in your life. I mean, think about when we were kids. I think a lot of
Right.
us very easily latched on to people on our favorite kids' TV shows in a very deeply emotional way. And then, we probably can recall those conversations with parents or teachers being like, well, Barney isn't real, sweetie. And,
Exactly.
in like Barney's not coming to your birthday party and is not
Right.
going to, be your best friend.
Yeah.
But even as we go through other stages of development, there can be those deep emotional connections. And so it
Mhm.
is quite commonplace, but I think it has more to do with recognizing it and the degree to which we engage in it and
Mm.
the, impact that has on us.
Yeah, so what you're helping me realize is that there are probably levels of
Right.
attachment. Right. And some can be really casual and maybe some go as far as being, overly enmeshed
Hmm.
and tying in. It's funny when you said being kids, I remember being 2 years old and my favorite show was Lassie. And
Hmm.
I was so attached that I would get really upset about taking a nap because I was so afraid of missing this show because I loved it so much. And that was my first parasocial relationship, right?
Hmm.
Now that I'm realizing it. And it's gone on and, on throughout my life.
Yeah.
And I can imagine HSPs particularly maybe being uh, more likely to deeply attach given our emotional expansiveness, responsiveness. We tend to go deep in our interests and attachments. Could we talk a little bit about that? How an HSP might experience these relationships?
Yeah, no. So it's interesting because at least for me, when I was looking at available peer-reviewed journal articles and research
Mm-hmm.
on this, there hasn't been anything that I've seen as of, today's recording that specifically focuses on
Mm-hmm.
HSPs and parasocial relationships or parasocial interactions. However, like you were stating, one of the things I was like, well, because it's such an emotionally and psychologically driven phenomena that or phenomenon, excuse me, is the fact that like HSPs, we are emotionally expansive people, very
Yeah.
emotionally attuned,
Mm-hmm.
empathic, that there could be a particular vulnerability for us
Mm-hmm.
of just kind of like automatically kind of becoming like really enveloped in the parasocial paradigm.
Yeah, it's true. I was sharing with you earlier how I've started to realize all the different types of parasocial relationships I have personally and not really realizing it before, because it just has seemed pretty natural. And
Hmm.
a big one is a musician, which we share that love for music. And, one of my favorite musicians is Brandy Carlisle. And I've noticed throughout my life, I've had my favorite musician that's been like the number one spot. It shifts as I shift,
Oh
but
yeah.
um, it's funny. I've been watching clips on YouTube of clips of old concerts and just realized and seen the progression of her career and realizing like I feel proud of her. So funny. Like a sister.
Yeah.
Because I've seen her go from, we have kind of similarities in our backgrounds where she grew up very poor with an alcoholic
Mm.
father and has had to really fight to, progress in her life. And I'm like, oh, I can really relate to that. So I think it makes me more susceptible to attaching. And
Hmm.
then I'm like, oh, look, she's doing so great. And she, she's getting more notoriety. Um, and I just appreciate how she lifts people up along the way in that. And so I think there's like a values connection as well.
Yeah.
So as I was thinking about our conversation today, I was like, wow, this is really layered for me.
It is. And I
Yeah.
think thinking about the layers or degrees, typically if people envision, you know, someone who's involved in parasocial relationships, they think about the most extreme
Right.
case, which, is someone who's like obsessed or will frequently cross boundaries with the
Mm-hmm.
object of the parasocial relationship. But for a lot of people, it's about, I can relate to you. And I think this is one of the reasons, again, I approach this with sensitivity, because I think we often overestimate the amount of social support that people have had in their
Yeah.
lives, or really healthy human connection.
Yeah.
And one of the positive things about parasocial relationships is the idea that you can have a positive role model, someone that you relate
Yeah.
to, and you're like, because I can think of so many people who have had that experience where they're like, I didn't know anybody who had my life story,
Yep.
my experience, and I saw this person who is a public figure and who's successful being who they are. And it
Yeah.
made me feel like maybe I could make it, or
Yeah.
maybe my life had meaning and purpose, and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doomed to be whatever negative things people told me.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you even think about certain groups that, particularly think about marginalized, oppressed, and stigmatized groups, there are certain public figures where it's been this like point of
Yeah.
pride and esteem that like this person is succeeding and doing incredible things, which is a positive representation of our community.
Yeah.
Um, so, that's like those are actually like not only natural things that help us connect to any fellow human being, but also it's one of the positive things like
Yeah.
about that, of people being able to say like, oh, there are other folks out there that I can relate to, and it can be a source of inspiration that can motivate people to make their own accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's helping me pull apart the layers of the parasocial relationship where sometimes it is a role model. It's maybe some twinship where you see yourself reflected in another person and it's inspirational, it's hopeful. Um, and those are incredibly positive, right? And maybe it gives you something to keep moving forward.
Hmm.
And I know there's also a downside,
Hmm.
maybe a dark side. You know, something
Yeah.
I've seen for myself is, musicians I've grown up loving. Recently, I've realized, oh, they have problematic politics, or, there's been egregious acts they've committed, or some controversy, and I can't ethically support those musicians anymore. So, can we talk a little bit about the downsides? We hinted at it already, but let's go into that more of what are the downsides of forming these attachments with either fictional characters or musicians or public figures.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things is, it can be people can have a dependency on the parasocial relationship or the parasocial, you know, public figure as a source of emotional fulfillment,
Mm.
esteem, or human connection.
Mm.
Um, Also, there can be an accurate maladaptive understanding of relationships. So
Mm.
specifically, relationships are characterized by like the willing active participation of both parties and are reciprocal. And
Right.
so if people are just kind of like, oh, I'm idealizing this person and the parasocial relationship that like we're forming, it can kind of make people think like, oh, well, this person just is everything that I could ever want. And it's perfect. And it's
Mm.
kind of even within my control. And that's how every relationship should be. And it's
Yep.
like, well, no, like people are always going to have their own sense of personal agency, and relationships are collaborative, and even really healthy
Mm.
relationships are going to have disagreements or
Yeah.
conflict, or people have different beliefs and opinions. And so, how can you
Mm.
work through that instead of being like, you have to be everything I could ever want or need in a person, or else it's
Right.
not worth it,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah, it's
know?
really setting people up for failure in relationships.
Yeah, if it's not checked, right? Because I think
Right.
if you have that self-awareness of like, this person is a role model or an inspiration, but I know like there is no interface between us, then you could kind of be like, yeah, I'm looking for those qualities and characteristics in others, right? Like,
Right.
but if it's kind of like, no, it always has to be like this idealized version that I've formed in my head, that's when it
Right.
can be really hard. Um,
Yeah.
Also, something that can be a risk too is
Hmm.
placing less effort in forming and maintaining real life relationships. So, kind of what we were already talking about, or at least not prioritizing those relationships.
Hmm.
Also, another thing can be making the parasocial relationship the like center point of one's identity or life. And that can take a number of forms. Like I've definitely seen examples of people where it's like that is who they are as a person. Like they love this public figure or like, and that's like everything that is. But also I've seen examples where people have devoted a lot of money to
Yeah.
their favorite public figure in a way where it's like, and I'm not just talking about like a few things here and there or splurge. I'm talking like repeatedly dedicating a huge sum of money to their paper public figure. Excuse me, favorite public figure.
Yeah.
Got mixed up there. Um, and sometimes people will act like it's almost like pledging fealty, where it's like, I must, like, I have to, like, show
Right.
up for this person. Like, I have, anytime that they're creating something, I have to. Or going back to, like, if there's a public figure that gets into trouble and has, false, well, any kind of allegations or whatever lodged against them, um, there can be people who will, I mean, I've heard stories of people who took time off of work, traveled across several states or even to another country to show their support to their public figure.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, and there are people who are just like, it's like this sense of mission. And one of the things I'll have it is I'm like, well, if there was somebody in your family or your friend group or your community or even your place of work that like needed that level of support, would you be like, yeah, I'm dropping everything and
Yeah.
helping this person out? And usually the answer is no, because there
Yeah.
have been like high profile cases where it's been pointed out like, hey, this issue that this person is facing is a larger scale issue that affects a lot of people who maybe don't have the same kind of power and influence. And if you really are concerned about it, like maybe this could be an opportunity to get involved in like this broader movement to address this issue.
Mm.
And usually what will happen is once it's resolved with like the public
Yeah.
figure, people pack up their stuff and go home.
Yeah. Will you
Yeah.
show up for the people in your life the way you show up for this person you don't know?
Right. No,
Such an
and
imbalance there.
there is such an imbalance there.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important point of consideration. Um, I think the other kind of downside of parasocial relationships too is, again, this is not common, but
Hmm.
it's when people cross interpersonal boundaries. So this can take the form of, one of the examples I can think of is like people basically making inappropriate communications or contact with their favorite public figure. Um, I can also think about, and this has happened a lot online in particular, like if there is a fan base that loves a particular public figure that, and somebody criticizes that person or that group or whatever, there will be death threats or people who said like, you should
Right.
kill yourself. And
Mm.
I was like,
Yeah.
I don't think like if somebody, I don't, it should never reach that point of,
No.
calling for someone's death just because they don't like someone or they have concerns about
Yeah.
what somebody's saying or doing.
Hmm. It gets really extreme.
Yeah.
And it it becomes their whole personality, really. Like this is the
Yeah.
my whole life is centering around this person, this figure, this yeah, this character, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Yeah, that feels really dangerous.
Yeah. It can feel really dangerous, but, to balance it out in terms of like
Hmm.
some of the other things we hadn't mentioned that's on, going back to the positive sides is it can connect people to other people. So again, like one of the
Hmm.
things that's a concern is like like what's your in real life social support network? And there's been
Hmm.
really beautiful stories of people who said like I was able to tap into a subculture or into a fan community of people where I formed real life relationships
Hmm.
and, felt a sense of belonging that, wasn't just focused on this particular point of interest, but also, expanded into other things.
Hmm.
And so that it can kind of, in the more healthy adaptive side of things, be a bridge for people to connect to other people, where
Yeah.
they're like, well, this is something we all have in common and we all like, and so this can break the ice and like help me to reach out to other people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a point of shared connection. So the the parasocial relationship could then be a pathway to in real life connections and attachments. So
Hmm.
how do we find that balance? How do we maybe start to detach from the
Mm.
public figure, set some boundaries, and then maybe move more into real life connections?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the person and on
Mhm.
the amount of social support in their life, right?
Yeah.
And their resources. But I think um hmm, it's important to recognize that there's a difference between being deeply moved by somebody's work or by, their life story and versus becoming like a devotee of them, right? So that
Mm,
there's like that distinction. And I think what can be done is like redirecting one's time and energy to forming and maintaining relationships in real life.
mm,
So, for example, if there's an actor who played a character that you admired for their charisma or morality or intelligence or kindness, you can look for those traits in people rather than just
mm,
being like, I just have to kind of really like just focus on this person or this character as being like the source of those qualities, right?
mm. Oh, that's really helpful to think about because there's a reason you're drawn to this person or
Mm-hmm.
this character, right? It could be
Mm-hmm.
this actor, but in this specific role.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, what is it about them? What values do they have? What traits do they have? What experiences? I love this. It almost feels like a hack of sorts, like a way to
Yeah.
tap into what you're looking for in your relationships.
Right. Yeah. And I
Hmm.
mean, it can be just like kind of a impetus, right, for that, where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I really want to find somebody who is like that. And again, realizing that like a character, whether it's completely fictitious or like, like a character you read in a book or is being portrayed in a film or a television show, that, it's not going to be this like idealized, perfectly formed situation that you have complete control over, but you could go like, yeah, this is something for me to hold on to as a positive example and that I
Mm,
can look for. Um, so I think there's that, but I think also just going back to like basic interpersonal skills and social skills and just being like, well, realizing that public figures are people. And I think
yeah.
sometimes with the way that we've all been conditioned around fame and celebrity and people who do public facing work is there's
Hmm.
kind of been this idea of like, well, it's what they signed up for. But as like, I feel like over the past couple of decades, public figures have been more transparent over the fact that they're like, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign for my privacy to be invaded or for people to be
Yeah.
rude to me or for people to do things that are really scary and upsetting.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think it's important for people not just to make assumptions that, oh, well, because you're doing public facing work, that means that I am entitled to do and say whatever I want to you, and you just have to
Yeah.
accept it. Because I've also seen some language where people have kind of been like, well, if I have paid money for your work or your services, then I can do whatever I want. And it's like you owe me, like it's transactional. And it's like,
Mm,
well, no.
yeah.
So I think it's always important to think about like, would you do this with any human being? Is
Right.
this like healthy, appropriate, ethical,
Mm,
lawful behavior to do to
yeah.
anybody? And if you're like, well, no, it wouldn't be, then to be able to like pull back and go like, okay, well, what is the actual real life exchange, right?
Mm, hmm.
Like what is the appropriate like point
Yeah.
of interface between me and this person, given that. So for example, if you go to a concert and you meet your favorite band, and you get an autograph,
Hmm.
of being able to be like, that was a cool, casual,
Yeah.
short-term interaction
Yep.
I'm gonna hold with me for the rest of my life. but that doesn't mean like, and this person's my best friend now, and
Right.
I should get an invitation to their wedding, or
Mm-hmm.
if I'm in financial trouble, like they should pay my bills, or things like that.
Right.
Or I have the right to critique who like what they do in their lives or their partners. Because like I think
Right.
with you, me being music fans, how many examples, not just music, honestly, but even in acting of like there have been fan bases that, let's say your favorite actor or musician gets a partner,
Mm-hmm.
and there will be people who, as almost as if they were friends,
Yes.
just saying like, I don't think that they're right for you, and da
Yeah.
da da. And it's like, even with some examples where it's like, okay, yeah, this person has said and done some things that are really upsetting. Is it appropriate for fans to be like, we are going to make petitions and,
Right.
you know, or like dedicate opinion pieces to say like you shouldn't date this person? It's like, no, that's a
Mm-hmm.
personal choice.
Yeah.
And again, like that's crossing a line because you are not directly involved in that person's life,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have that kind of relationship where you have the right to
Right.
say like you shouldn't date this person, and because we are your fans or your followers or consumers, then we are going to try to put pressure on you. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that so many times. People do, they get attached. They maybe feel protective or feel a sense of access that is
Hmm.
a little extreme. Yeah, I remember, so Trevor Hall is one of my favorite musicians,
Mm.
and I remember seeing him years ago when he was just playing in like small little music shops, and I remember when he started dating his wife, and people were not everybody, but some people were not happy about that he was not going to be single anymore. Um, and you see this all the time. I see it in the queer community too. If like there's someone who's bi or pansexual and they're dating a woman, but then they date a man, and then there's some anger and emotion that gets brought up. There's just so many examples of this, right? Where there's that possessiveness or feeling like you have a say over someone's choices. It can be really dangerous.
Right. Or how people can feel let down
Let down, yeah.
or feel like my identity
Yeah.
is contingent upon you making these certain choices in your personal life.
Yeah.
And it's like you are who you are. Like that's the other thing to consider is like whoever you are, however you identify, is not going to change just because this person that you idolize may all of a sudden make a decision that contradicts your own personal
Yeah.
identity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, when people are kind of like this, and I've also even seen it with fictitious characters, I'm sure that you followed up like how there have been like different literary characters, some of them who've been around for centuries, even
Mm-hmm.
longer, where folks will speculate about like, well, really, this is the identity of this person,
Yeah.
and you can tell from all of these context clues. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes, like,
Sure.
given the particular time period that
Mm-hmm.
certain authors wrote characters, they had to be very judicious about how they wrote them
Yep.
because, it wouldn't have been published and there would have been a huge backlash.
For sure. Or
However, there
safety issue.
absolutely.
Yep.
But there are also some times where, you know, there have been a number of authors that have been very clear about like their decision making of like, this is who this character is
Yeah.
inspired by, this is who they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is like my kind of sketch of their like identity and their
Yeah.
choices. And there will be people who, even knowing that, will be like, no, 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 no. I know better than this author about like who this
Right.
person really is.
Yeah.
And there will be again that possessiveness of like this character has to be like me. This character
Yeah.
has to represent this community or else.
Yeah.
And it's like, can't you still love this character and get inspiration from them even if they're not like you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Right. You get to still be yourself, even if this character is different than you originally expected. And I
Hmm.
understand, there's great disappointment that can happen. And as an
Hmm.
HSP, I felt that disappointment, whether I realized where it was unethical, or I realized maybe, oh, they're actually not queer. I really wanted them to be
Yeah.
because we need more queer representation. And there's a little bit of heartbreak, right?
Mhm.
Um, However, it's important to keep that perspective in mind of it's okay.
Right. It's okay. And I think even though for any of us that belong to marginalized, oppressed, and stigmatized community, because,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Black and I'm bisexual and I'm a
Mm-hmm.
woman,
Yeah.
is even though, yes, there are always going to be privileged or dominant groups that like you
Mm-hmm.
will frequently see represented in media,
Yeah.
um, or even like kind of being lauded as public figures, there are still people where like I know this character is me. They were designed to represent this community that you could go to. So that's another hack of if
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I wanted this particular character to be just like me because I just love them so much. Is it's like, well, are there characters that you already know from the jump,
Mm.
like like come from your community that you could identify with from the get-go to get that need met instead of saying
Yeah.
like, no, this character, it has to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can think of just thinking about books, like there are a number of characters from different genres that are now, coming from my communities that I can look at and go like, oh yeah, like I already know because trust me, I understand there have been, times in the past where I would like kind of have that like, oh man, like it would be
I know.
great to see like a Black woman in this like in this book and doing
Mm-hmm.
these kind of cool things, but they're not there.
Yeah.
And you know, but at the same time, it's like now as an adult, like I can
Mm-hmm.
find a lot of that literature across different genres where it's like, oh, it's just here. Like, and this
Yeah.
is great. And I can still love that other stuff for what it is.
Yeah. Right. It's just having to look maybe a little longer, a little harder for the characters that do represent you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I always wish like there's never enough lesbian movies or shows, and so I'm always looking for that. I'm like, oh, can I just please have some more?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes the feeling is like, why isn't it readily available?
Yeah.
Because I think, because when you like, even when you're saying that, like, why aren't there enough lesbian, books or shows? It's like I can think of certain movies or things that I
Yep.
grew up with, like particularly I was a big I've always been a big lover of independent film,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly there was this kind of renaissance of independent queer cinema.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like officially called like the new queer cinema in the early 90s that kind of rippled out. And
Mm-hmm.
so even though yes, like it would be great for us to catch up to the point where it's like,
Yep.
oh, it's like happening at the same frequency as like
Yep.
straight characters at the same time. It's like it's not as if it absolutely doesn't
It's true.
exist.
You're absolutely right, because there will be times where I stumble upon something like, oh, how did I not know this existed? Right? And so it's like
Right.
it's out there, but you're right, it's not as out in front. Have to
Hmm.
do a little bit of digging, a little research. Yeah. Which thankfully is not that hard these days.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hop
Absolutely.
on Google or Reddit or wherever you find your information. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's there.
Yeah, or even if there's a certain database, so like, let's say you have a streaming service of
Mm-hmm.
see if you can use some of those search tools to find the kind of films or television shows that like feature the kind of characters that you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that you can be able to find that. So it's just
Yeah.
like, I think it's just more about like reframing it, right?
Yeah,
Instead of just
exactly.
being like, I have to like whatever I get, like it has to like represent me,
Mm-hmm.
or I have to kind of make it fit all of my needs,
Mm-hmm.
is being able to go like, okay, well, is there stuff out there like that I haven't even considered that searching for that I could get that already was designed
Mm-hmm.
for me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it sounds like, doing a little bit of research and reflection. Also, I hear kind of maybe an underlying message today is diversify with, where you're connecting with, what you're attaching to. A mixture of kind of in real life and parasocial.
Hmm.
Not just putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
because I mean, even though like I think also there's a sense of like positive emotions that can be derived from parasocial relationships, I think also it's important to understand of like you need people in your life to be
Yeah.
able to like give you love and support and show up for you. And I think if there's this kind of reliance on like I feel like I can only get that
Mm-hmm.
of being able, to branch out. And in fact, like I would say, like my key take home message for people
Mm-hmm.
is, parasocial relationships are common. They can help us better understand our emotional interpersonal needs still, for long-term comprehensive social and emotional fulfillment. It's important to have supportive real life relationships. And if that's a struggle, it's important to get the help that you need to find that, which can come from a licensed mental health professional, for example. And again, like I know I said before, but I think it bears repeating of one of the things I've thought about a lot lately is how with the changes that we've experienced in society, how we connect with each other, how we communicate with each other, meet with each other, it's often taken for granted that people have the kind of ability, skills, and resources just to like form relationships or that like already people came into the world with a baseline of healthy support. And there are so many people, as I'm sure you can relate, who didn't have that.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are lots of people, I think, whenever there's some kind of controversy that erupts around a public figure, where there's so many people who are like, this was like I didn't have like a healthy parental figure in my life. So this
Yeah.
person, kind of became that surrogate for me.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I had struggles making friends growing up. So like I was able to take comfort in this cast of characters that became like friends for me. Um, so I think it's important to have that kind of care and compassion for people that instead of just kind of castigating them and saying, oh, like, why would you do that? That's so just gross, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Of being able to go like, yeah, well, what how are people not showing up in your life or how
Yes.
have because also even like when it comes to a number of people that I've worked with when it comes to trauma and there are a number of people who are like people are scary and they're
Yeah.
just like the idea of having a close relationship to someone is horrifying because what if I get brutalized again?
Exactly.
And so I think it's important to think about that of like has there been something that's happened that has made reliable, trustworthy, healthy support hard to find? And
Exactly.
if that is the case, if that's why parasocial relationships seem so appealing, how can we help you to like get these really like strong, reciprocal, affirming relationships in your life, you know? And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
broader question, not only on an individual level, but I think about how can we have the kind of social infrastructure in our societies
Yes.
again that make that more possible because I think we've heard the news about the loneliness crisis and
Yes.
about how people particularly in adulthood are like how do I make friends
Mm.
and so I think it's a broader question where it's like how can we connect to each other again as people in real life.
Yeah, exactly. People are hungry for a connection, and this uptick in parasocial relationships or the intensity of it is a byproduct of that. And
Yeah.
so, parasocial relationships can tell you not just what you're looking for in real life, but what maybe you're not looking for,
Hmm.
right? Tells you a lot about how comfortable, safe you feel in relationship, and maybe is a clue to what you've been through in the past. So I'm hearing to have lots of compassion for maybe the people in your life who have strong parasocial relationships, but also for yourself.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
yourself because I think there can be the assumption that people just have everything that they need
right.
and that they just willfully are not accessing it. Now, is that the case sometimes? Yes. But I think when I think about, whether it be personal life experiences or, any of the clinical cases that I've worked with, there are so many people who are like, I came into the world without the tools and resources that I would need to accomplish this, and there was nobody that taught me how to do this. So I had to make do with what was available, and how painful it can be when people are like, what, you didn't know that? You didn't know how to
Yeah.
do that? You didn't know that that was wrong? And it's like,
Right.
no, I didn't.
Yeah,
And no one
exactly.
came in with solutions. No one came
Hmm.
in with guidance or even alternatives. It was just like, don't do this. But then it's like, what do I have?
Right. Right. What goes in its place?
Right.
Hmm. So if people are realizing, oh, something might be missing or I'm struggling with connection, yeah, getting support from a therapist,
Hmm.
right? Spending time in community.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, and that's definitely like the on the more personal scale of things.
Hmm.
But I think a longer term question and pursuit is like I've kind of had daydreams of like what would it be like for licensed mental health professionals, sociologists, anthropologists, like to come
Yeah.
together and be like, yeah, how can we
Yes.
create these kind of spaces that would
Hmm.
naturally allow people to form and maintain relationships. Because I think we were talking before we got recording
Hmm.
about like we are both ladies of a certain age. And
Yeah.
so um, we, I think, are part of a certain
Hmm.
generation of people or multiple generations of people really who remember what it was like, where it's like you had no choice but to be face to face with people
Yeah.
and how there were multiple opportunities to connect with folks. And now a lot of those things have kind of gradually deteriorated to the point where you
Yeah.
can't just easily be like, yeah, there are all these different places where I can meet people and strike
Yeah.
up conversations and find commonalities and, be able to build relationships from there. There are lots of
Hmm.
people who are like, I don't have that.
Yeah.
It's not readily available in my area, or I didn't grow up in that world, so that
Right.
feels more foreign and distant than trying to connect with people through digital means or through
Hmm.
media.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of those public spaces or points of connection have dissolved. And you're right, there are some folks who are younger than us who never have lived with that experience. So maybe don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And so basically, I guess what I'm saying is like I think it's important for all of us to try to figure out what are the solutions
Yes.
that we can implement, not only on a more individual personal scale, but it's like how can like I said, people in all the fields I previously mentioned be able to go like, yeah, how can we find like in real life, low tech or no tech ways of
Yeah.
connecting people?
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is a bigger systemic issue
Hmm.
of how our communities, our culture is set up. It's
Yeah.
so overly digital now.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I've seen some people make predictions, which I
Hmm.
can see this happening of almost there being a countercultural
Yep.
movement towards people going like, yeah, let
Yep.
me actually devote more time to meeting people in real life and being able to connect and socialize without, any digital devices or
Hmm.
digital things to do. And I mean, there already have been, examples of that. Like I heard about the Luddite Club, which was started at a
Yep.
Brooklyn high school and now has several chapters across the US at different high schools. And I think there are like one or two undergraduate university chapters of it as well. And so that's a really great example of people going like, well, how can we do this? Like
Hmm.
conscientiously create this experience. And, so far the kind of firsthand accounts of people who completed it, the young people who completed it said they were like, oh, this is incredible.
Yeah.
This is such a great experience. And it's really relatively simple,
Yeah.
like it's not like, oh, well, this is going to be very expensive or
Hmm.
time consuming. It's just more about making these little tweaks and finding alternatives.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing that pop up around me as well. Just, people gathering at a cafe or on the beach and just reading together or, just spending time together. No phones, no devices. People are really looking for that. We were talking about kind of the nostalgia of the 90s before we hopped on and,
Hmm.
I think you were implying this too. Like part of that is that drawl of living in a time without constantly being in front of a screen where
Yeah,
there's real
no.
connection.
And still being able to get things done the way that you need to,
Yeah.
because I think whenever there's a huge technological leap,
Hmm.
it's almost hard to think about what life was before it or how you did things. But it's like we did it. People were able
Yeah.
to do all the things that we heavily rely on technology to do now before without it.
Hmm.
And there were, again, so many places and spaces for people to be able to connect, and that you didn't have to be constantly aware
Yeah.
of every single thing that was happening in the world at every moment. And you still
Yep.
were well informed, you know?
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah, now we're kind of hyper informed, hyper tapped in. It's like you don't need that to build relationships and connections. Yeah.
no, no.
Yeah. Well, Lana, we're just about out of time, so I just want to
Mhm.
thank you for everything that you shared today. It's been really eye-opening for me and to look a little bit deeper into this phenomena. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
But just this presence of parasocial relationships and what it means about how we're living as humans today.
Hmm.
So yeah, I appreciate you coming back on and diving into this topic with me. It's an even more personal one than I realized and something I'm
Hmm.
continue to think about. And I'll be sure to link all of your resources, your website, your contact information for
Yes.
folks. You have some continuing education resources.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if you could tell folks a little bit about working with you if they're interested.
Yes. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm licensed both in the state of Georgia, but also I have PsyPAC licensure to see
Hmm.
people who are in all PsyPAC member states. And primarily my work revolves around doing both individual and couple/slash relationship therapy. Also, I have a kink and clinical practice 101 continuing education course that is a beginner's level course designed for licensed mental health practitioners that are interested in working with folks who are involved in the kink and BDSM communities, but they don't know what to do. They
Hmm.
maybe feel kind of lost in the sauce about how to work with people in these populations. So I have that available as a self-paced course on the website for the Touchstone Institute.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so like yeah, if people are interested in signing up for that, there's the link. And then if people are interested in working with me for individual or couple/slash relationship teletherapy, I also have the link to my practice's website.
Beautiful. Yeah, all those links will be in the show notes for folks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.